Time to get some insight on the Iowa Hawkeyes, who, wouldn't you know it, leading the Big Ten West. I predicted them to win the West, but didn't know if it'd be this way. David Eickholt covers Iowa for 24/7 Sports, Hawkeye Insider. And Dave, before we dive into what Iowa's done this year, what they've done this year is pretty impressive given the injuries they had. And you had the news yesterday, Cooper DeJean, their star corner, star punt returner, their top playmaker, I would say, on the team, is out for the season with a leg injury. What is the impact in this game and just the rest of the season without a potential first-round draft pick?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, Jeremy, if you look back to the start of the 2022 season, I believe that Cooper DeJean has the third most touchdowns on the team, and he does not play offense. He's, I would say, one of the most dynamic players in the country with the ball in his hands. And, of course, I think Iowa would have played him on offense in this game as well, just to try and throw in a new wrinkle. So I think this changes things up in all three phases of the game. Now, if you remember last year against Nebraska, Cooper DeJean got hurt on the fourth play of the game. And then Trey Palmer goes for 9 catches, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. The guys behind him were super young. They got thrown into the fire. So, Isaiah Williams, one of the best wide receivers in the Big Ten, at least. He's been really impressive this year. I think Cooper would have been pretty much following him around in this game. But Deshaun Lee showcased some really, really good ability earlier in the year. He's going to get the start at cornerback. He had 15 tackles, 2 pass breakups. They really like him as a future guy. I think he'll be a starter next year and do some really good things as well. So it definitely changes things up on the defense. But like you said, I think Cooper DeJean is almost like a folklore because every time he went out there for a punt return or he got the ball in his hands, you hear just the whole Kinnick Stadium go Coop. And it's a really interesting thing. I would say he's probably one of the top 3 most exciting playmakers in the last 20 years at Iowa, maybe since, Tim DeWitt, Brad Banks, some of those guys. So I think it's a massive loss, but I don't think the drop-off is going to be as drastic as last year just because they have a little bit more experience on that back end. But, Illinois' passing attack has looked pretty impressive here the past couple weeks.
Yeah, I got to say, it's making me at least, I think Iowa's the favorite coming into this for good reason, but it makes me think of something like Illinois' passing game's pretty good, so they can get the ball out quickly, but I think it's such a game changer in special teams. And we know special teams is such a huge advantage for Iowa. So I am interested to see how it changes the game here. But David, Iowa 8-2, 5-2 in the Big Ten, despite all the offensive issues, despite all the noise around Brian Ferentz. I know it's the Big Ten West, but how are they winning this many games?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the worst division in college football history. I think it's certainly up there this year, right? I mean, Iowa's the only bowl-eligible team at this point. But it's just Kirk Ferentz. I mean, I think the leadership that's been put in place between the players and the coaching staff, it's among the strongest it's been in the Ferentz tenure, at least according to people I've talked to. I think you need to give a lot of credit to Jay Higgins at middle linebacker. I mean, taking over for Jack Campbell, who won the Butkus Award last year, who's now going to be a big-time NFL player for the Detroit Lions. Jay Higgins, third most tackles in the country. I believe he has 121 on the season so far. He's on pace for the Iowa single-season record. I think he's done a nice job. And then Nick Jackson, the Virginia linebacker transfer, has gotten better week after week as well. So I think those guys have held down the middle really, really well. And then Sebastian Castro is another guy who I really think has been one of the more dynamic players in this defense. It seems like he's all over the field. He can force fumbles. He can pick off a couple passes. He's dangerous on the blitz, and his coverage ability is really, really improved. So while Iowa's defensive line is not as strong as I thought it would be, of course, losing Noah Shannon for the year, I think, is a big deal. Yes, they have experienced defensive tackles, and don't get me started on the Noah Shannon situation. I think there's a lot of opinions I have about that. But I think Iowa's defensive line gets the job done. And then I think Iowa just does not give up explosive plays. I mean, Iowa's giving up 4 yards per play. It's almost as good as last season. I thought they'd be a top 15 defense going into the year. I think they've cemented themselves as a top 5 defense. I think they've given up 1 touchdown in the past 16 quarters, 3 touchdowns in the past 24 quarters, and they've only given up 1 rushing touchdown this season. So it's just a consistent group. Maybe doesn't have the name recognition outside of Cooper DeJean that past Iowa teams have had, but it's just a very, very solid group. And if there's one thing I've learned, you don't doubt Phil Parker. And I think Phil Parker probably deserves to be the Broyles Award winner this year. It's kind of crazy. He hasn't won one to this point. And then Iowa, I think they just do enough offense. But I know Kirk says it's complementary football, but it's more so the defense, special teams, and the offense does just enough. And I mean just enough. This past weekend, Iowa had 402 yards. It's the first time they've crossed 400 yards in 32 games, Jeremy. I mean, that's
Against a
It
good record.
really is unbelievable. Yeah, that's the other thing. I think, Deacon Hill looked good in that second half. Iowa decided to finally get the ball to Caleb Brown, who I've been kind of screaming from the rooftops for because he's the most athletic guy on that offense, in my opinion. But the running game, I think the O-line's gotten better week after week, and they have 3 capable running backs. But teams are going to stack the box, and I think that's exactly what Illinois should do: stack the box, focus on stopping the run, and force Iowa to complete passes to the outside. And I'd be very surprised if Brett Bielema did not do that this week.
Defensively, without DeJean, Illinois probably will be out without Caden Fagan, who's just a powerful runner, is that freshman. Reggie Love had a good week last week, but this is going to be a much bigger task against Iowa than Indiana to run the football. So how do you expect Iowa's defense to attack Illinois? Whether it's Altmaier or Paddock, I still kind of think it's going to be Paddock, to be honest with you. But
yeah.
What do you think? How do they attack the Illinois passing attack especially?
Yeah, let me put it this way, too. I don't think Iowa's going to take the bait of Brett Bielema saying that Altmaier's starting. I mean, I talked to players on Tuesday, talked to Kirk, and he said they're preparing for both. And you kind of have to, especially when Paddock goes out there and throws for 500 yards, which, by the way, was, I think, 23 less yards than Cade McNamara had all season. So just putting that into perspective as well. I'd be, Phil Parker typically doesn't like to blitz too much. He likes to prevent the big explosive plays. But I think with DeJean out, I'm not going to be surprised if Iowa gets a little bit more aggressive, especially if it's Paddock. Like, Paddock made some really good decisions. He's on a heater. But I think Iowa's going to try their best to make him make quick decisions and accurate decisions. So I think, Nick Jackson's the guy I brought up. He's been very good when blitzing this year. Sebastian Castro is a very dangerous guy, as I mentioned earlier. He might get in that backfield as well. So I think Iowa's not giving up a lot of the deep passes this year. I think the safeties, Xavier Wampa, Quinn Schulte, have been very disciplined in that area this year. I think Iowa's cornerbacks, they feel good enough. And I think Iowa can almost live with death by 1,000 paper cuts than to give up, a big passing play. And that's kind of the case they've been all year. So I'm keeping a very close eye on Nick Jackson. I'm keeping a very close eye on Sebastian Castro. I think they're going to blitz whoever's at quarterback and at least try to make, get the early pressure on them to force them to make some mistakes. Because if Iowa gets up by 8 or more, Jeremy, Iowa is 70-2 over the last, I think, 6 or 7 seasons. I can't remember the exact time frame, but that's just the way Iowa is. They kind of slow chokehold you, and then you think you're back in the game, and then Iowa's defense finds a way to come up with a stop. And that's just, again, I think it needs to be a 30 for 30 case study on how they've won this many games without competent offense. It really is incredible. But I think Iowa's going to play a little bit more aggressive this week. And as you mentioned, Caden Fagan, if I'm not mistaken, Iowa really wanted him badly as well. I think Iowa wanted him more so at linebacker than a running back, and I think that was a big decision as well, a big factor. But yeah, I think Iowa's going to be a little bit more aggressive, maybe throwing a cornerback blitz or two. But again, Deshaun Lee hasn't seen significant action since the first couple of weeks. He passed those tests of flying colors. But if I'm Brett Bielema, if I'm that offense, I kind of target the younger secondary and just kind of make them make plays.
What makes Phil Parker so good? It is a shock that he hasn't won a Broyles Award, by the way.
I think the consistency. I mean, Iowa doesn't do anything over the top, and he's so interesting in the way he recruits and the way he develops, because I remember talking to parents, talking to some recruits about when Phil goes to their house, he'll literally give them a big questionnaire about, okay, how many yards is it from, the middle of the field to the sideline to sideline. And he measures just the geometry of certain angles, because I think Phil is so good at teaching when to take appropriate risks and how to take the right angles. And I think in reading the body language, I think those are the 3 things that really stick out to me about his game. And yes, of course, everybody talks about the linebacker play that they get from Phil Parker. Seth Wallace, I think, is a huge part of that as well. I'm surprised Seth Wallace hasn't left Iowa for a defensive coordinator job, to be quite frank with you. But I think Phil Parker, just his consistency and not doing over the top too much, because I think defenses try to over adjust nowadays, especially with the era of the spread offenses, and they take way too many chances in island coverage. And I think Iowa's safeties usually play back. Iowa's, plays a lot of quarters. They'll play a lot of cover 2, cover 3, and they'll frustrate opposing quarterbacks because they want to be able to take those chances. But Iowa's so disciplined in that. And a lot of Iowa's turnovers are a result of a quarterback trying to force a play he probably shouldn't force. So I think he's just so good at teaching the fundamentals of the game and getting his players to fully buy into that to maximize their potential. And I think he's also very good at recruiting guys who aren't about themselves. I mean, especially on defense, there's a lot of guys that want to be the guy. the two cockiest positions, in my opinion, are wide receiver and cornerback on the football field. And I think he's done a very good job about getting the right kind of guys that buy into his system. So I think it's a combination of just the teaching aspect, the consistency, and recruiting the right kind of guys that fit his system.
This holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with a healthy lifestyle while tackling your holiday to-dos. Too busy with holiday plans to cook, but want to make sure you're eating well? With Factor, skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping, prepping, and cleaning up too, while still getting the flavor and nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. This holiday season, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered right to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off. Okay, let's dive into this offense, David. I figured they couldn't get any worse. Well, they haven't gotten worse, but they haven't gotten better. 123rd in the country last year in scoring offense, 123rd this year in scoring offense. So outside of injuries, why has this not gone well, and why is Brian Ferentz not back, according to Beth Gates?
Yeah, no, and I think too, like, of course the injuries play a part, but I also think Kirk Ferentz is overestimating how much of a factor it plays. I think the system just does not work anymore. I think Iowa has some receiver talent. I like Caleb Brown. I like Deontay Vines. I mean, I'm not saying these guys are world beaters, but they should not be where they're at right now. And I think also, too, a big part of it, this goes back to even before Bryant. I think Iowa's quarterback development's been really bad. I mean, you think about some of the best quarterbacks in the Kirk Ferentz era, it's either one-and-done guys or it's the guy's sophomore season. Brad Banks, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in, at least modern Iowa history. Drew Tate, his sophomore year was the best. Ricky Stanzi, his first year starting was the best. C.J. Beathard went 12-0 as a regular season, his first season starting. Like, Nate Stanley is pretty consistent for the most part, but he never got like the big win against Penn State, against Wisconsin, right? Spencer Petras just kind of stay the course. So I think Iowa's quarterback development's been a big part about why they haven't taken the next step forward. I think Iowa's running scheme just is kind of outdated at this point, especially if you can't get the ball on the perimeter. So I think that's a big part of it. Like, Iowa loves tight end U, and I think they need to embrace it because I don't think it's particularly close that they are tight end U. Maybe Notre Dame has a little bit of a say. But as part of the reason they're tight end U, because their inability to use wide receivers, I think there's a legit case you could probably make for that, right? I mean, the last Iowa wide receiver to catch a pass in the NFL before Emir Smith-Marset was Kevin Casper. I mean, that's a long time ago, Jeremy. So I think it's a combination of scheme. I think Brian Ferentz is still a good developer of talent. I don't think that he's a good play caller either. I think his situational awareness is not good. So I think it's a variety of things. Lack of quarterback development, an outdated scheme. I think they could still use the basic scheme, but they have to be able to make tweaks to it, at least to make it somewhat viable nowadays. And and the play calling. I'm very intrigued about who they get this next hire, because I think there's two names I'd keep in mind. John Budmeyer is the reason why Cade McNamara is at Iowa. He's a Wisconsin quarterback coach. Same with Deacon Hill. I think it'd be a very underwhelming hire for Iowa fans because he's been on staff for 2 years, but not in a coordinator role. But another name I'll tell people keep an eye on, Paul Chryst, I think is a very legit candidate. And him and Kirk have a good relationship, runs a similar style there as well. And his nephew is actually on Iowa staff as an offensive analyst as well. So it's going to be very, very interesting to kind of see what happens. But this Iowa offense, this is not like a 1 or 2 year bad thing. I think this has been going downhill. The COVID year, I don't count. I don't know why people still count COVID year as a real thing. But this is offense been going downhill, I think, for the past 4 seasons.
Yeah. All right. Well, they might only have to score 15 plus points to win a game, right? That's the good news for Iowa's offense. And we'll see with Illinois, but I just respect the heck out of that defense so much. So, I mean, they're coming off 22 points and, as you said, 400 yards against Rutgers, which is a better defense overall than Illinois.
Shocked me they did that.
Illinois' got a strong front seven for the most part, but the secondary has huge issues. So what do you see out of this offense? What are you expecting out of this offense against Illinois?
I think they're going to throw everything against the wall. I think they're going to try to establish the run, obviously. I think they'll take a couple shots downfield. But, again, like they can't rely on Cooper DeJean to lock down half the field. They can't rely on Cooper DeJean to return the ball for 15 to 20 yards every time he gets a punt return, right? They still have Torrey Taylor. I think Torrey Taylor is going to play a big part in this game. He only punted the ball 3 times last week, which is amazing. I mean, it kind of makes me think that he even know there was a game last week because he's been getting quite a workout this season. Had a bad week the week before that in Wrigley. So I think Torrey Taylor is going to come out and have a huge game. And I think he's going to be responsible for at least some Iowa points. But at the same time, I think, Caleb Brown's going to be a focal point of the offense. I think LaShawn Williams has had a really nice year. Look for Jazian Patterson. I can't remember the last guy who runs as hard as Jazian Patterson out of an Iowa back. Like he's not the biggest back in the world, but he attacks every single opening with just sheer aggression and will not be afraid to go at, Newton. He won't be afraid to go challenge a defensive lineman, even if he's in the gap. That's just the way he's wired. And I think if you're going to run Iowa's running style, you kind of have to have that mindset. Otherwise, you're going to be dancing around the backfield looking for a home run play. And I think that's been an issue for the past couple of years in Iowa's running game as well. So I think they're going to try to establish the run a little bit. I think they'll throw in a couple trick plays. I don't know how many deep shots they'll try to take. But I also think Deacon Hill has a lot more confidence than he's had all season long. I mean, he had a really good second half. Threw a really bad pick to end the first half, but he threw 8 straight completions before that, and I kind of saw the light come on with him. So I think in the second half, he said, I threw a pick, but it was clear that the offense is capable of working. And I think he did a much better job. I thought the offensive line did a really good job. I don't know how they're going to stack up against Newton because I don't know how many of Iowa's starting linemen are going to play in this game. I mean, Logan Jones is still questionable at center. Rusty Feth is not 100%. Mason Richmond probably will play, but he's not 100%. Like the injuries are in every single position group. So it will be interesting. I think they're going to try more so to establish the run. But I also think if they are going to beat Illinois, just given all these injuries, they're going to have to get out of their comfort zone. They're going to have to take a couple chances downfield. And now how many of them are they going to take? I think that remains to be seen. But I think with senior day and everything else, I think it's definitely a motivated group, especially after what happened last year when, they lost Nebraska. They could have clinched the Big Ten West in Kinnick Stadium. Now, look, that loss was probably a long time coming based on the offense, but, Cooper DeJean does get hurt, and who knows what happens if he stays healthy. But I'm very, very intrigued about how Iowa comes out of this because if they come out really aggressive and they put points on the board early, I think they're going to feel really, really confident for the rest of the game. If they go out there and get 3 and out and the defense gets worked a little bit, then I think my eyebrows are going to be raised a little bit more.
Yeah, the injuries and obviously the offense make me question, can Illinois go in and win for the first time since Kirk Ferentz's first year? Illinois has not won at Iowa City since 1999. 7 straight losses there. They won a long time without playing Illinois and Iowa, but it's Iowa, man. This is how they win, man. It's ugly. It's not sexy, but they win.
No,
that's kind of what they do, David.
It really is a case study. It is incredible. Now, they're just so against everything modern college football. And I mean this from this sense. Like everybody loves sexy offense, right? Nobody gets excited about great defenses. Nobody gets excited about the punter. Iowa's just its own unique brand, and Iowans embrace it. And there's a lot of the country that absolutely hate it. And again, I cover the team. I forget how to write about offensive touchdowns every once in a while, but they win. And at the end of the day, that's what Kirk Ferentz cares about. I've said this before too. Kirk Ferentz could drive a 1970s Corolla, right, across country with 3 tires, a broken windshield, no headlights. And as long as he gets to the destination, he'll say, yeah, we made it. So he doesn't care how bad the journey is. If they get the win at the end of the day, that's all Kirk Ferentz really cares about.
Yep, and he wins. He keeps on doing it. And if they win on Saturday against Illinois, they clinch a spot to the Big Ten championship game, where they'll get Michigan or Ohio State. We'll see how that one goes for you, David. But
whoever comes out of the Big Ten West, like it's just a sacrificial lamb, right? Like let's just be real about it.
Just happy to be there. Just happy to be there. David
I'll take
Eickholt,
a free trip to Indianapolis. That's fine.
Me too. David Eickholt, Hawkeye Insider. Appreciate the time. I'll see you in Iowa City on Saturday, man.
Hey, take care, man. Thank you.
You've heard us talk about home field apparel since the start of the season. There are a lot of collegiate apparel brands out there, but we wanted to partner with Home Field because their designs are the best out there. Some of Illini Inquirer's favorites are the basketball ringer tee, the rose tee, and the 1980s long sleeve with the script Illini. It's great. Be sure to check out homefieldapparel.com, filter by Illinois, and see what we're talking about. And our listeners get an exclusive deal using code Illini23. Using that code Illini23 gets you 15% off your first order. We all know you're wearing Illini gear, so if you're in need of a refresh, we really think that you should check out Home Field Apparel, which has the best designs, and these shirts, guys, are really comfortable. Their designs are super unique, and a lot of thought goes into each concept. There's really nothing else on the market like what Home Field is doing. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com and use code Illini23 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. This episode of the Illini Inquirer Podcast is presented by Underdog Sports. We see a lot of you are downloading Underdog Sports, using the promo code, and having fun, which we love to see. If you haven't already checked out Underdog Sports, be sure to do so. It's super easy to use. You go on the app, go pick whether favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total than what is listed. For example, Travis Kelce, he's very popular these days. If his number is set at 50 receiving yards and you know Taylor Swift is in the house, you may feel confident he's going to go way higher than the number. Do that with 2 to 5 different players and you're in business. If you go 5 for 5, you can 20x your money. So sign up today with promo code Illini and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with promo code Illini to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. There are a lot of fantasy companies out there, but we decided to partner with Underdog because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. You must be 18 or older and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org.